Hey everybody, when was the last time you jumped online and you were not hot, heated, and upset about what you saw? When was the last time you went online and everything seemed cordial? You were just catching up with old friends and a reel or a TikTok had popped up on your feed and you didn't think anything of it. It didn't have to do anything with politics. It's been a long time for some of us. I don't know what's up with my algorithm. Maybe I can't avoid it because I work in news. I'm a reporter and I'm essentially throwing myself into this every single day. But there are several studies out right now that not only people think that the opposing party's viewpoints are bad, but also that they're bad for the country. We got the First Amendment. People have the ability to believe what they want to believe. They can worship a certain God. They can subscribe to a certain political party. But online, it seems, and there are studies about this, algorithms are picking up what's going to bring you back for more. Does it get you excited? Is it content that you agree with or disagree with? Well, I am having a second conversation with a guy who's trying to work on this, who's trying to find a way for us to be cordial with one another yet again. He's a professor at George Washington University. His name is Peter Loge. He heads the Center on Ethics in Political Communication. How did we get here when we're at each other's throats? How do we get away from it? Take a deep breath. Maybe take in mom's advice and think before we speak. Is there even an opportunity for us to be self-reflective, or would we rather just other people do the work for us and get this goal done? One that is treating others the way that we want to be treated, or is there some self-reflection that has to be done? Peter and I are talking about some of the latest headlines, the controversy about Bad Bunny's performance, how his halftime show turned into a political back and forth. President Trump sharing this video that included racist imagery of the Obamas, the communication strategy of the White House rolling out their response after there was so much pushback, not only from Democrats, but Republicans, and those who many would say never break away, figuratively speaking, never break away from the president and what he has to say to the American public. A lot of other key moments that we touch on. Last time I talked with Peter, it was in the wake of the assassination of Charlie Kirk and also the arson case involving Pennsylvania Democrat Governor Josh Shapiro. I asked him, since we last left our previous conversation, how are we doing since we last chatted with him? And he basically said January has been a long couple of years, something to that nature. But Peter's trying to find a way, just by having conversations like this one here on Byline, in order to find a way for us to, it sounds so cliche, right? Find common ground, but find an area of civility that we can agree to, the purpose of this country, respecting somebody else's ability to have free speech and think freely, express it in a way that they see fit. It seems like a tall order, but who knows if you can get anything done staying in silence. So, with that, I'm not going to take up too much more time in this intro, considering Peter has some really great insight. Peter Loge from George Washington University, about how we get out of this mess. Have we dug ourselves far too deep underground in order to actually get ourselves above the fold and find some civility where it has eroded? The geographical pun was not intended, but I certainly will keep it in this intro. So with that, let's chat with Peter. The last time that we chatted back in October, got a lot of great feedback from your insights. So I really wanted to have you back on. I loved our conversation, and I'm here for round two, Peter. So thank you.
I like that we set a high bar, so now I can just let everybody down gently.
You know, the fate's in your hands. One big thing that you left us with last time we chatted was we all could be better online. You know, we all have a stake in the game of lowering the temperature. How do you think we're doing?
You know, it's been a long January. January 2026 was a long 3 years. I think everybody wants everybody else to be better online. And when it comes to ourselves, we're not so invested in it. So we could all still be better. I think one way to think about it, that I'm beginning to think about it, talk about it, is there something that we all have in common? And it's not, do we share a view on balanced immigration policy, but is there kind of a civic soul of the nation? And if so, what is that soul, and what do we owe that soul of the nation? So how do we behave if this were not just a physical space, but kind of an idea that we occupy? And that might then inform what it means to be better online. It means be less shouty, but also hold each other and ourselves accountable to something greater than the moment and ourselves.
What do you think the right messaging is in order to convey that? Because one would say that Joe Biden tried to do that. We're battling for the soul of the nation, right? That was his line on the campaign trail. So he lost. And, the issue of cost of living dominated the campaign in 2024. So what is the proper communication strategy to achieve that goal you mentioned?
That's a really good question. And affordability, of course, is still going to dominate. You look at poll after poll, survey after survey, people think the market's going to do well in the next year, but they feel like their own finances might be in trouble. They still can't afford hospital bills. They still can't afford, rent and mortgage. The president's approval rating is low and falling. It's so low that the Gallup has decided to not do presidential approval ratings anymore. And I think they're still going to dominate, right? I live here in Washington, D.C., and for all the high-minded things I talk about, I want to know, when's my garbage getting picked up, because it hadn't been picked up. But I think there is this deeper connection that we all want, we all seek, that we're not just in it to get to the next day, but we're part of something greater than ourselves. And for many, that's a faith, Islam or Catholicism or Judaism or whatever. In addition to that, maybe there's a notion of what it means to be a citizen. And we need to hold our elected officials to account for that. We need to hold ourselves to account for that. Maybe it's just a bit more of, I don't have to be perfect, but I can be a little bit better. I can talk to my neighbor. I can engage positively because we have a shared set of values and a shared vision of what it means to be an American. And maybe just a bit more of that, maybe.
Before I get to some topical questions, do some of your students think that some of the rhetoric coming out of Washington is just normal? They grew up in the last 10 years in this era where President Trump has dominated the political sphere, where has nicknames and bashes people with these, critics would say, like bully type tactics with these nicknames. Do they think this is normal, the way that people talk to each other in politics right now? Because for us 10 years ago, we all thought, whoa, hold on, we're entering a new space.
Yeah, you raise a really good point. And Trump has changed the rhetoric, right? You've got Governor Newsom, Democrat of California, engaging this, Governor Shapiro of Pennsylvania engaging in this. And I grew up in a different political time. When I grew up, this wasn't what politics looked like. So for me, this is holy cats, what's going on. If you're 20 years old and you're sitting in my political communication ethics class, you started paying attention to politics when you're maybe 10, which is when President Trump rode an escalator, right? So this is by definition normal because it's what you know. None of them love it. And it's also in many ways reminiscent of a politics of the 1700s and early 1800s, where people just made stuff up about each other. They're insulting each other, they're criticizing each other's faith, or you're an atheist, or everybody had a newspaper and everybody's handing out pamphlets and they were full of invective. And that was, you want an ugly campaign, you look at Adams-Jefferson rematch, and that was nasty as it gets. Then it got to a point eventually, especially post-World War II, where it was kind of like we have a shared endeavor, right? This Cold War, that shared endeavor is democracy and democratic values. We lost that around the end of the 1990s and entering the early 2000s. And now it feels like the wheels have come off. And I think the question is, if there is a civic soul of the nation, what is it? And can we get it back? And if not, then what?
Does it have to take war to rally the troops, figuratively speaking?
Well, that's not working. President Trump overthrew the government of Venezuela, and the American people, to the extent they noticed or cared, didn't love the idea.
Where has that story gone? That has been largely kept out of the headlines. At least I haven't heard any update from it. You get Maduro, bring him to the States to face, domestic charges. What are we doing other than, apparently trying to extract some oil reserves?
But it's true. That kind of falls off. Russia's invasion of Ukraine is many years and many hundreds of thousands of casualties later. And that's also fallen off. President Trump is threatening to invade Greenland and Canada. People are like, yeah, but that sounds ridiculous. Why would we invade our allies? And I still can't pay my rent. Please fix the thing that matters to me, which is I got to be able to afford to get by day to day. And then I also think we would all welcome a reconnection to something bigger than ourselves based on not just what we have in common, but who we are in common, right? You look at the responses to the halftime shows of Bad Bunny and Kid Rock. And a lot of I'm looking at conservative social media. I read the Free Press. I think it's a terrific publication. And a lot of conservatives are saying, you know what? Didn't understand a word he was saying. Don't love his politics, but wow, that felt good. Like this was a celebration of culture and who we can be together. Enjoy the moment.
President Trump didn't think so. Said it was a disgrace.
Okay. I won't be taking musical recommendations from the president. He won't be taking them from me. That's fine.
I mean, unless you're a Phantom of the Opera fan, he loves that.
Late is, which is, I'm not sure he fully gets the irony of that. This is a great show.
Well, I want to use the halftime show as a segue because this is deeper in my line of questioning. But Bad Bunny ended his performance with this big black and white billboard. Not billboard. It was on the Jumbotron. It basically said that love trumps hate. Why is a message that seems so universal such a divisive statement?
That's a really good question. And Bad Bunny is, of course, American. He's Puerto Rican. Puerto Rico is part of the U.S. He's an American citizen. I think too many use any opportunity to say, see, I told you so. Those people aren't like us better because they're awful on both the left and the right. It's really unfortunate that so much of what so many people say is perceived by the other side to be somehow anti or you're out to get me. By love, you mean you actually hate me, rather than embracing a message of, you know what, we all have the common humanity in common. Let's figure out a way to move forward with that. Hate motivates people. It raises money. It turns them out. You're angry. You got to do something about it. And for a lot of people, that's kind of the defining feature. I am what I hate. I am what I'm opposed to. And I think a better politics, a politics we'd all prefer, is one that says we've all got shared humanity, right? We're all looking out for each other. There are limited resources. We got to figure out how to navigate them. Not everybody's ideas are equally okay in a democratic society, but we can figure this out if we all agree that a better position to argue from is one of togetherness. There's an interesting experiment you may have read about. There's a company in California that set up a telephone booth in San Francisco and one in Abilene, Texas. And in San Francisco, there was a label saying call a Republican, and one in Texas said call a Democrat. And the idea was pick up the phone, somebody on the other end, and you talk. And it's from a Democrat and Republican. You talk about your kids, you talk about the weather, you talk about whatever. And the science behind it is there are chemicals released in our brain that make us happier and feel better when we're having positive conversations. We're not yelling. If you're angry, your brain releases chemicals, make you angrier, and it's bad. So let's start from a position of what do we have in common? What do we share as human beings? We're happier, less stressed, things go better. So maybe more of that.
Go back to, and I had not heard about that scenario, so I'm intrigued and I'll have to look into it. You talked about obviously the idea of affordability is going to stay top of mind. Certainly, it's going to be key strategy headed into the midterms, especially for Democrats who are trying to seize some semblance of power. Why do you think the White House thinks it's politically expedient from a communication standpoint to talk about acquiring Greenland, to topple the Venezuelan government? None of these issues that largely were issues on the campaign trail.
That's an excellent question. And if you read the interview with the president's chief of staff, she would probably agree with you that, maybe the White House would benefit from some message discipline, talk about what people care about and ways they care about it, talk to people in ways that they want to hear about things, right? This was President Biden's challenge and Vice President Harris's challenge in the last presidential election. They kept saying, yeah, macroeconomics are great. Look at all this other stuff. When people's lived experience was it's hard to pay the bills. Please talk about the stuff that matters to me. You look at survey after survey, the American people want the president to talk about things they care about, which is paying the bills. And the president keeps talking about invading our allies. And that's making them really frustrated. And I think Republicans in Congress are beginning to see that, which is why you're seeing Republicans in Congress vote against the president on tariffs, for example. So you know what? The macroeconomics are one thing, but my voters right here feel the pinch of this because a tariff is a tax and we are anti-tax. So stop doing that. And I think you're going to see it increasingly as we get closer to the midterms and Republicans are looking at polling data going, you know what? I'm with President Trump on a lot of policies, but I got to tell you, my voters aren't with him. So I got to be with my voters if I want to keep my job. And we're going to see, I think, more and more of that.
Well, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is bowing out among many people who are not running for reelection. I think it's some 50 members of the House it is who are not running for reelection here. But back to MTG. I mean, she basically says the president has ditched the America First agenda. I mean, she's not, being short with her comments here. So you do think that there's going to be a kind of breaking away of President Trump's allies if he does not rein in some type of message that had rallied his support originally?
I think so. I think, well, people respond to their incentives, right? And we try to avoid doing things we think we're going to get punished for. We're more interested in that than doing things we think we're going to be rewarded for. It's one of the lessons of behavioral economics. And if elected officials, if candidates think voters will punish them for supporting the president, elected officials will stop supporting the president. If elected officials and candidates think voters will punish them for opposing the president, they will not oppose the president. At this point, the president is not popular. If you're a Republican and you oppose President Trump, there's a bunch of people going to be mad at you. Right? The question is, will there be more people who are mad at you if you go along with this guy? So elected officials and candidates are kind of playing a guessing game. They're trying to figure out what their voters are going to think about what the president does next. We've got a lot of people who support President Trump's policies. You got a lot of people who think that President Trump is politically, helps them politically. The moment candidates think President Trump hurts them politically, they're going to abandon President Trump.
Let's talk about this racist depiction of the Obamas in a video that President Trump claims that he did not get that far into the video to see that, right? He claimed that. But that came after White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt had said that any reaction to it was fake outrage. Communications experts had said that that was a botched communication response, right? It was hours after this video was posted. And by that time, you already had folks like Tim Scott, Republican from South Carolina in the Senate, come out and say, whoa, whoa, whoa. He actually said, I thought his phrasing was interesting. He said, this was the most racist thing I've seen out of this White House, which to me suggested that he's seen some other things that he thought were racist. How do you think, I mean, we don't know what happened on the back end, right? They're blaming this on a staffer, but the communication strategy, what's the best way to respond to this if you're the White House? Is it just to condemn it and say, whoop, yep, this shouldn't have happened? And even if the president didn't see it, should he have apologized? What's your take on it?
One, it shouldn't have happened. And it's worth noting that Tim Scott's an African-American senator.
Thank you. Yeah, for
So
the context.
he's been with the president. Like, he's been a strong supporter of the president for a long time. For him to go back it off there. The right communication strategy would don't push stuff out that's racist. And the video was in a longer clip that raised nonsense questions about the 2020 election. So the fact that the president continues to make stuff up about an election he lost is lost in the conversation about the president pushing out racist garbage. Shouldn't have happened. The best response to doing something that shouldn't have happened is apologize. You know what? I own this. Buck stops here. Won't happen again. I'm sorry. That's not this president's MO. This president leans into every mistake and every criticism, right? You look at it. He's made fun on the campaign trail. He's made fun of people with physical disabilities. He said awful things about women. He said awful racist things about others in the past. And their answer is always, yeah, there's no backing down, right? The president has never admitted he made a mistake about anything. So of course he's not going to admit a mistake about this. And there's some part of his base who are going to agree with the press secretary in the White House and say, you're overreacting and it was just a joke and this is just a cartoon or whatever. No.
No,
In
it's
addition,
not.
like,
No.
it's not, and I don't care if a staffer did it. Your name is on it. You pushed it out, right? If you put something in the public domain, you are responsible for it. Like, you didn't watch the whole thing. Well, maybe you probably should have, right? If I recommend a movie based on the trailer and it turns out the movie's trash, like, I made a bad recommendation. It's my fault, right? And somebody asked put in a prompt into a large language model to like do me a video that depicts the Obamas as animals.
And it appeared, by the
Like,
way, so this repost, the watermark, at least on the video, you might have seen this, was the same watermark on the AI video of where the president was dumping poop onto his opponent. So apparently, possibly, it came from the same person, whoever this person is behind that account.
which means there's somebody who is asking AI to create a racist video that the president will then repeat. So the president shouldn't have done it, but it's not like the president tripped over a rock, right? And the rock just existed. A human being who supports the president of the United States started this chain that the president then repeated. Shouldn't have happened. If it happened, and like I've been a staff, your boss doesn't always read the close stuff. People make mistakes, right? In which case the president should have taken it down immediately and said, look, I own this. Buck stops here. Won't happen again. The staffer did it's fired. I'm
Yeah,
really
no word about
sorry.
that.
Nothing.
Well, let me ask this too, because if you go on an AI platform, even if you go on the Sora app, right, that will create these videos based on, like, I can insert a photo of my dog and I say, okay, have it score a touchdown and it's the Super Bowl MVP. I actually did that, right? I had too much free time on my hands one day. But some prompts that you will ask these models, they'll come back and say, nope, I can't do it. For Sora, you can't put someone's face in it, right? In some cases that did not physically authorize it. At what point are the tech companies going to flag that a racist image, a prompt about that would create something like we saw with the Obamas is flagged? Something clearly fell through the cracks here, unless some of these models don't have some of those stopgaps.
Tech companies should do better. We should all do better. But yeah, there should be those stopgaps. There should be standards. It should be rules. Those rules should be enforced. Stuff will still fall through the cracks. Somebody should be picking up those things that fall through the cracks. But the problem isn't a tech problem. The problem isn't an AI problem. The problem is a racism problem. Racism wasn't invented by the internet. There were racist depictions of Chinese Americans, of Germans, of like you name it, from the start of the U.S. If you look at old political cartoons from the 17 and 1800s, a lot of us straight up racist drawings. Those weren't done by AI. There was some guy with a pen or a quill or a pencil or something. Just like now, there's some guy with a computer program. The only way it becomes unacceptable is if there are consequences for bad behavior. I can say be a better person, but if you keep getting rewarded for being a bad person, you're like, yeah, I should probably be better, but look at all this cool stuff I got. Voters have to punish elected officials at the polls. They have to say in a Republican primary, you know what? I'm with President Trump's policies, but Bad Bunny had it right. We got to love each other. So I'm going to vote for the Republican who supports strong borders, who supports low taxes, and who agrees that at our core, we're all human beings. And we all got to love each other. And that guy who's promoting this racist garbage, I encourage them to spend more time with, honest to goodness, anybody else. But unless it happens at the polls, this nonsense is going to continue. Voters got to punish bad behavior.
Let me ask a bird's eye view question. In moments of national tension, whether it be violence, protests, international crises, what separates rhetoric that reassures the public from rhetoric that escalates distrust?
Really good question. And I think it's what we want is a rhetoric that says, as Americans, we are all Americans first. And as human beings, we're all human beings first. And presidents have done that in times of crisis. President Bush, after 9/11, had a couple of stumbles out of the blocks, but his speech in the well of the House of Representatives was kind of amazing. And the New York Times Magazine did a story about that speech. And they said that they first picked the location. Clearly, the president had to say something to reassure all of us. I was in Washington, D.C. I lived a block from the Supreme Court. I lived down the block from then Attorney General John Ashcroft. This is personal. And one idea was Army War College. One idea was an Oval Office address. And one idea was Congress. Army War College says we're on war footing, we're going to go. Oval Office, you're alone. Well of the House says we are Americans, we are in this together. And I was glued to my television, and I needed to hear that as an American. I needed to see him at ground zero, right?
Yeah,
When he said to the Muslim
and that speech to
community,
Congress that came after when he was on that loudspeaker and said, "Hey, I see you, and the world will see you," right?
right. And it's, we are in this together. And this was, I worked in Democratic politics, right? I didn't vote for the guy, but I needed to hear from my president that as Americans, we are in this together first, and that Islam wasn't the enemy. It was the terrorists who were the enemy. My neighbor wasn't my enemy, right? President Clinton did this after the bombing of the Murrah building. Timothy McVeigh blew up the building with where the FBI headquarters were in Oklahoma City. And President Clinton went and said, we are all Americans first, right? President Reagan after the Challenger explosion, right? So that's what I want out of my president, Democrat or Republican. You know what? I believe deeply in the promise of this country. And I need my leader to say, together, we will come closer to fulfilling the promise of this country. We'll come closer to being a more perfect union. What I don't need is somebody saying, you know what? It's your neighbor's fault. That's terrible and dangerous.
I think you just answered my next question, which was going to be if you could rewind a few of the most polarizing political statements of the past year, what's the one common adjustment that you would make? And I think you just answered that right there.
I think we have a common civic faith that we share. I've got friends on the left and the right, and sometimes I think they're equally kooky. Some of my friends in the middle, I think they're equally kooky, but I believe deeply in our founding documents. I know Thomas Jefferson was incredibly flawed. I know that the man who wrote All Men Are Created Equal owned slaves. I know that. But a handful of people came up with something that said, you know what? There's something here. There's a promise that if we work together, we can never fully fulfill, but we can move in that right direction. For me, that's the magical, amazing thing about the United States. And I want to renew that faith in our civic soul, which means we got to have a guy in the pulpit saying we've got a civic soul that together we can renew together. And I don't think President Trump is doing a good job in the pulpit at the moment.
Let me use that. Let me ask you, how are you working to achieve that goal with your Center for Ethics and Political Communication? What are you working on right now?
I'm talking to you, which is good. I'm talking to my students about it. I've written stuff for some political publications. I give talks, right? I'm going to be at Montana State late in March. Montana State has a series they're running on public lands. How do we share our public lands, public space? In Bozeman, it's hunting and recreation and resources. And I'm going to go out. They've asked me to come out and talk about the public space, which is our polity, right? What is the public square, metaphorical and literal public square? Like, how do we do that? I've got some connections to the Basque country, the Basque people, which is in northern Spain. And a lot of what America learned about democracy, they learned from the Basques. John Adams, one of our founders, wound up in Bilbao and learned a ton. There's actually a statue of bust of John Adams in Bilbao in a major pedestrian thoroughfare. Big Basque festival in Boise every year. I wrote a piece for an Idaho newspaper saying, the Basques taught us a lot about how to be together, how to be competitive, how to be entrepreneurial, and how to take care of each other. And we need to relearn those lessons from the Basques. I want to do more. I need to do more. I'm open to how do I do more? I'm just trying to stand on my street corner, pounding on my Constitution, I guess. I don't know.
Crazy guy on the corner, but hey,
my students will certainly say that would be true. My students
only if you're giving them less than a B grade, right? As long as they're getting A's, they don't care. Excuse me, they don't care. I want to get you out of here on just some topical things right now. We know that Tom Homan, the so-called border czar, had said that, this is big, that, ICE is going to be pulling out of Minnesota, of Minneapolis. Renee Good, she's gunned down. Alex Preddy. In your mind, who from the White House has actually been the best messenger about ICE in Minnesota, if anyone was a good messenger, and immigration as a whole? Was there anyone? Because clearly Kristi Noem has been certainly vilified the most, it seems, right?
Yeah, I think the current border czar is probably the best. He served under Democrats and Republicans. He seems to, at least publicly, have a good relationship with Governor Walz. Everybody wants the bad guys out. Nobody wants bad guys on the streets, regardless of where they're from, if they're from Mexico or Honduras or Canada or Troy or Connecticut.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I grew up in New Haven, Connecticut. I know a lot of bad guys in my neighborhood, all of whom were born in New Haven, Connecticut. Like, everybody wants that. And I think he's trying to do a good job because for him, it's about solving the problem. How do we enforce immigration? How do we lock up the bad guys? How do we just lower the temperature in Minneapolis? And hopefully it works, right? I hope we get more than talking points, to quote President Reagan, when it comes to Russia. Trust but verify.
The Olympics right now, Americans are being booed, whether it be the opening ceremony, when J.D. Vance was showed up on that Jumbotron. In some specific events, it seems as well, Israeli athletes also being booed. How do you think that athletes who are not political, who do not share any political message, whether it be on social media or just before the event, during the event, or after the event, should enter that conversation with folks, maybe it's in person at the games or online as well, to maybe just respond to the moment itself? I don't know if you have any insight here.
Yeah, I don't know. I do think it was interesting that at least in the opening ceremonies, athletes were cheered and the vice president was booed. If I were an athlete, I would focus on doing my thing, right? It's hard enough to compete at that level. We all watched Lindsey Vohn's horrific crash and just, oh my gosh, such an athlete, such a competitor. The last thing she needs to be thinking about is whether or not the people in the stands are thinking about JD Vance. She needs to, like, could she pull it off with her ACL? I'm a fan of the sports that are sort of go fast. I don't understand the
You don't
ones
like
with
curling? Is
scoring
that what you're
routine.
telling me?
Curling's okay, but it's like I get why people like it because it's soothing. But even at that level, like, just be the athlete maybe, and don't worry about it. Although I think it does highlight that America has lost its standing in the world. Polling of Europeans finds that most Europeans don't think America is a reliable ally. I've talked to foreign leaders who pull me aside and politely say, "The is the United States? What's going on in your country?" I give a couple of talks in October in Bilbao and San Sebastian in the Basque Country in northern Spain. I talked to everybody from graduate students who are from all over the world, international programs, or grad students from all over the world, elected officials, just friends of mine who happen to follow politics, college professors. Every single one of them asked, "Is the U.S. a functioning democracy?"
What do you tell them?
All of them want to. I say, "Yeah, I think so. We've got the promise. Our system is built to recover from bumps." But they are dismayed. They're angry. They don't trust the US anymore. I've had friends say, "Look, I don't want to do business with China. I don't share their politics. I don't share their culture. We have nothing in common." But they're reliable. I know what they're going to do next. And if I'm going to build a factory, if I'm going to make a long-term trade deal, I know what's going to happen next. I want to do business with the US. I like the US. I've been there. I like the people. I like the history. We share a culture. We share, in many cases, language. We share a lot of democratic values. But I don't know what this guy's going to do next. And I'm not going to build a factory or make a 5-year deal with a guy who's going to invade Greenland. I don't want to support China. But I got a business to run, and for a business to run, I need predictability, I need calm, and that's not what we're getting out of the president. Maybe Republicans in Congress, maybe elected officials, governors, certainly a lot of subnational diplomacy happening these days, are looking at this going, you know what? Our most reliable ally, our historical cousins, think we're getting it really wrong. We should probably fix that. But if I were the athletes, do your thing, like hit the half pipe, like do your runs, do your like curl. I don't know what the verb is. Throw the rock, the stone. I don't know, whatever it is. Focus on that
Let
because
it
that seems
slide.
really
Yeah.
stressful. Let it
Right.
slide. Like don't like let people like you and me talk about the noise. You focus on being the world's best at an amazing thing that we're all cheering you on.
Yeah, and I also have no business in downhill skiing either. So yes, we're gonna have these conversations. Last thing I want to ask you, Peter, if you were advising both parties on one single communication strategy that you would advise them between now and the midterms for Republicans and Democrats, what would it be?
Fix stuff. We're gonna get stuff done. Costs. Like I think affordability is a proxy for things aren't working. Right. So you know what? Roads are bad. We're gonna fix the roads. Here's what I'm gonna do. It's get blank done, as Governor Shapiro says. A friend of mine's a venture capitalist in Silicon Valley, pretty successful venture capitalist. And he says the most frustrating thing he finds about government is nobody actually does anything, right? There are a lot of sternly worded letters. We're going to have commissions. Like, just, you want to write a check, write the damn check. Like, Chris Cuomo spoke at GW, the School of Media Public Affairs, I don't know, a year ago maybe. And he said, a lot of people may not like what President Trump's doing, but he's doing something. Democrats had 2 decades where they promised to do stuff, didn't do anything. So if I were a candidate, if I were a candidate, say, tell your voters, I know why you're mad. I am also mad. I also go to the grocery store, put gas in my car, and worry about how I'm going to pay for my kids' education. I'm going to fix that. And here's what we're going to do. And focus on that. Talk about things people care about. in terms that make sense to them, fix things.
I mean, listen, but Democrats, they got a lot of credit for passing the Affordable Care Act. You know, President Biden was able to get the infrastructure package through that President Trump didn't and said that he was going to. You know, I'm not vouching for them, but I'm just pushing back. You know, they did get some things done, but do you think that President Trump has communicated better than Democrats that he is getting things done?
Well, the Democrats got stuff done, but talked about it in macroeconomic terms and in terms that didn't really resonate with people. You know, a lot of and President Trump is discovering the mistakes that President Biden made, right? President Biden and Vice President Harris ran on macroeconomics. Globally, we're doing great. Our economy's
Wall Street's
doing
doing
great compared to
fantastic.
you.
Yeah,
Right. Look at macroeconomic terms. It's not as bad as Germany. Okay, but have you been grocery shopping?
right.
Right. And President Trump is saying, look at the job numbers. Like, dude, I get other people's job numbers. I need you to come to my hometown. Job numbers here, not so great. Right. So I think it's the talk to people as if they were people, not as if they were polling respondent. Like, talk to people as if they were people. You know, again, I live in downtown DC. I love Washington DC, beautiful city, full of smart, interesting people. I love that I get to disagree with them because it makes things more interesting. At the moment, what I'm really worried about, the garbage being picked up on my alley because I got a rat problem. And then stop with the noise and the distraction. And why are you arresting 5-year-old children in bunny suits? Don't you have something better to do with your time? Like, for example, fix the road. Like, oh, we're, denying funds or whatever for a bridge to Canada because you're mad at Canada. But it turns out the guy who controls the other entry point is like a donor. Come on. Like, I got to sell stuff. Canadians want to buy my stuff. Can you please pave the road or open the bridge to allow me to sell my stuff to the people who want to buy my stuff? And then maybe stop telling me to hate my neighbor who, doesn't pray like me or love like me or look like me. Can we, like, he's a good guy. Get him like him and the husband invite me over to barbecues. And I got to tell you, the man is a wizard with a grill. Can you please stop criticizing him because he's gay and let me sell my stuff to Canadians who want to buy my stuff?
Peter, I appreciate your time. What's the best way for people to get in touch with any resources that you've written? Where should they go?
They can go to any resources I've written, go to peterloge.com, peterloge.com. I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on LinkedIn. And, I'm at GW. You can always just Google me. I'm alarmingly Googleable. And I try to get back to everybody who reaches out. Unless you're crazy, in which case, if you're crazy entertaining, that might be fun. But if you're crazy, just want to yell at me, that's on you, but I'm not going to respond.
That's fair. And congrats on your Googleable status. You've made it.
Yes, I have won 2026.
Peter, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks as always, Ben. Good to talk.
How much do you think presidents set the tone of how we talk to one another, of how we believe certain messaging in politics is acceptable? How much weight do politicians really have? And do you think that it really comes down to the ballot box in order to find leaders or even influence leaders to find a civil tone, whoever it may be? Does it come down to the ballot box? Peter thinks so. I would love if you were able to chime in too. What do you think? How do we get out of this? How do we get here? What steps you think some people should take immediately for short-term fixes, for long-term ways of treating each other more kindly? Put it easily at that. I'll also add this. Do you actually think that it's getting worse, the way we treat each other? Have we hit a flashpoint and maybe we're actually starting to talk to one another in a nicer tone? I'm just curious what your thoughts are. Comment, send me a message on social media. You know where to find me, Broadcast Ben. So I'm going to be asking myself this question too. What's one thing that you could be doing differently in order to make it more of a comfortable place online to talk about your own views, to talk to your neighbor, to enter a conversation, to sit down at the Thanksgiving dinner table and really feel like you can be a sounding board for someone to open up, whether it be a family matter or just somebody who may need a helping hand? What do you think you could do in the short term? What might others be able to do in the short term that's cost effective? It's free. It doesn't pay to be kind. heard that many times. Curious to see if we might be able to deploy that in our own lives. Here's a great question. Between now and the congressional midterms later this year, what's one way to have a healthier conversation about politics? What do you think? Comment. I want to know. You can also send me an email, byline with bendennis@gmail.com. What questions do you have for the experts? I'm taking them to them. The change makers, the analysts. Again, going beyond the headlines, spending more time to dive in deeper of why they matter to all of us, every single one of us. So with that, enjoy your week. And if you have the day off for President's Day in this week, get some R&R. Why not? See you later. Take it easy.